Rhaegar and Lyanna, they fell in love. They ran away to the Tower of Joy. Lyanna got impregnated, and out popped a baby boy. This boy was her son, this boy was her death. Here comes brother Eddard as she drew her final breath. Lyanna's last words were, "Promise me." Eddard did just so. He returned home with the baby boy. This baby boy was Jon Snow. Jon Snow grew to be a strong young lad, but was despised by Catelyn since before he could crawl. One day came his uncle Bingen, and they left to go to the wall. Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow. 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 Shortly after they arrived, Bingen disappeared, and Jon Snow was sad and alone. He was taken as a squire by Commander Mormont, who treated Jon as one of his own. One day, some undead things that were known as whites, these things tried to kill Mormont, but he and Jon put up a fight. Time passed, and Mormont led Jon to venture beyond the wall, to look for Benjen and the other rangers, and they found some, but not all. Jon Snow and a man named Corin Half-Hand, they snuck up on some wildlings. Jon fell in love with one named Ygritte, and then they did some things. Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow. Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow. Later on, Jon Snow meets Mance Rayder, the king beyond the wall, who says he must kill Corn to gain his trust, and Jon does so during a brawl. Mance Rayder now trusts Jon, and tells him of their plans to attack the Night's Watch at the wall. Jon Snow abandons them to warn his brothers and help save them all. Time later, the battle at the wall began, and all the fighting Ygritte died. This left Jon stricken with grief. With all the sadness, Jon Snow nearly cried. After some time, Jon gets selected Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Many duties and tasks leave Jon very busy, overwhelmed, he might need some scotch. Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow. Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow. Janos Slint, a man at the wall, disregards one of Jon's orders. After giving Janos a chance to live, Jon's forced to remove his head from his shoulders. There's stuff about a red lady and a man named Stannis. Also some more on Mance and Alliser and Jon's wolf ghost, but I'm getting tired of doing this. In the end, Jon Snow wanted to save the wildlings from a force of evil sweeping in from the north. But upon doing so, his brothers in black stabbed him once, twice, thrice, and a fourth. Jon Snow could possibly be dead, this would make many grieve and sigh. But the Red Lady has the power to resurrect. Jon Snow may come back as Azor Ahai. Jon Snow has the blood of a Targaryen and the blood of the Starks of the cold. His song will be the song of ice and fire. Now I'm done since this is getting old. Jon Snow, 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 Jon Snow.